Good evening. I'd like to call this Committee of the Whole held on April 13th, 2021 to order. And number 2.1, Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. I need a mover that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on March 30th, 2021 be adopted. Seconder? Luck and fair. And any errors or omissions? All in favor? Opposed? I'm not sure. Opposed, we had two.
I'm for it. I'm for it.
Approved, Adam? You're approved, okay. So that's approved unanimously. And that brings us to 3.1, our delegations, and we have a delegation of the Ashcroft Terminal. And is this Mr. Bryn Roach to present? I didn't hear what you said, but I see you running. Say that again.
English, man.
I wasn't the only one that missed. And we've got that feedback again. Now that works, seems to. And I'm sorry, I didn't get it's not Mr. Roach to present, so we. How come I've got this?
That was an older version, Your Worship.
Okay. I've got it. Thank you. Thank you. So Ashcroft Terminal and Mr. Eno Cole, the CEO of the terminal, is here to present to us. Welcome. I'm still echoing. Okay. Mr. Cole, CEO of Ashcroft, is here to present to us. Okay.
then, of course, we have 66 other staff members working in the operations, and a few of us on commercial matters and finance matters in the office in Vancouver. Like I said, it's a real honor for us to be here. I think we provided an update to different mayors at the TNRD meeting a few weeks ago already. And based on this, Mayor Brown, thank you very much for allowing us to present to the city today. What I will try to do, if that's okay for you, I will. We have a presentation which I'm sharing, and while I share the presentation, I cannot see you. So if there's something wrong, you don't hear me, please shout. If it's okay for you, we will go through this in about 20 minutes, 15-20 minutes. And then we have ample time and are happy to answer any questions that you may have. I hope you can see the pictures. I will just continue then. So starting from a macro point of view, where are we? Ashcroft Terminal, of course, for everybody in BC and in the local area, everybody knows where the different cities are. When we present to customers around the world on Ashcroft Terminal, this is the first picture that we always show, is to see that we're on the western side of Canada. When we look at the import goods that come from Asia, China primarily, that arrive in the port of Vancouver and that make their way to Toronto or to Montreal, or to Calgary. This is the appreciation of the distance, which is known to us all here, but not so familiar to everybody around the world. And likewise, on the export side, when we look at the size of the country, we look at the main exports of grain, for example, coming from the prairies, but then also closer to BC, of course, from the northern BC forestry exports. This is the picture, and where everybody can appreciate the proximity to the port of Vancouver. It is about 350 kilometers, but when you look at the size of the country and the rail connectivity, it is relatively close. Also, the other interesting fact about geography is the connectivity to rail, and Ashcroft Terminal is all about rail. And so this picture here is a bit technical, but it shows the two main railway lines, CN and CP. And what is easy to see here is that coming out of Vancouver and going to the east, for the first part, more or less until Ashcroft Terminal, the lines run in parallel down the canyon, and they have an arrangement between the two railways, what they call directional running or co-production, by which they actually cooperate on making this difficult terrain fluid and splitting up the rail side on one side of the canyon to go eastbound and the other side to go westbound. That for us doesn't look like a big deal, but in the overall map and scheme of things, it is a very big arrangement between CN and CP, where they actually cooperate, while in most of the country they compete head-on. And so being located very close, but just outside of this zone where they cooperate, is a huge advantage. And this is the interest and the reason for Ashcroft's development. Further down the road, as of Kamloops, the line splits. CP goes straight east and CN swings northward towards Edmonton. In terms of size, Ashcroft Terminal is about 320 acres of industrial land. And I think it's important to put this into perspective when we look at other logistics facilities. The next one in line here is Delta Port, 210 acres in Vancouver. A deep sea container and coal facility that is actually smaller than our terminal. And even then, when we look at the other container terminals in Vancouver and in Prince Rupert, they're all our site itself is significantly bigger. This is a picture, and it is a few months old, but I think it highlights the speed of the development at the site. So this is a picture down the looking westwards, where you see rail tracks, you see rail cars, you see in the middle a white spot, which is our new warehouse and our new development. And to the right side of the picture is a whole new area, which now 3-4 months down the road looks completely different. It is the equivalent of our yard that connects the CN main line. Running through the picture, the blue line is the CP line going into Vancouver, and on the red side is the CN main line. And this is really the unique proposition that Ashcroft brings to the logistics community is the ability to have at the same site, to the left serving CP and to the right serving CN, and with a yard that connects the two. So when cargo is unloaded or needs to be loaded, that arrives by truck, for example, the shippers, the exporters, the importers have the choice to use both CP and CN mainline. And so this is a very unique situation that only occurs in very few locations across the country. And then combined with the proximity to the Port of Vancouver and with the special zone of co-production or directional running makes this site really unique. So in short, it's the location. It's a private site with a 24-hour operation, 7 days a week. A big piece of land that we are developing in phases and in sequence in terms of infrastructure, and all the activities within the site are under our control. So meaning that the rail movements between the rail tracks and to the cargo loading facility and areas is under our control. So we can provide the service that the exporters or importers or users of the facility require. And then last but not least, of course, the weather is such that the winters don't produce so much snow, and in the summertime it's dry. So when it comes to cargo handling, forest products, it's really a key advantage. I'll continue a little bit with the activity at the site, and I'll won't go into too many details right now. There's obviously time for questions afterwards, but in broad strokes, we do a variety of activities all around cargo handling. The first and foremost being transloading cargo that arrives, for example, as you can see here, in containers, or that arrives in hopper cars, on gondola cars, and that is unloaded and stored and then reloaded into other types of rail cars, or leaves the site by truck, or vice versa, arrives by truck and then is loaded into rail cars for distribution across the country. This also includes rail car storage. So this is a big piece of our activity, where in the wintertime, for example, there's a need to store cars that are in circulation in the summertime, and vice versa. In the summertime, when rail cars are fluid, when certain commodities are less frequently used, then there's a need to store rail cars, and that's where our site provides that flexibility. Intermodal is another word, a smart word for container-related activities. So this is our main development for the next 10, 15 years will be centered around container traffic. And so the warehouse that you see here and the rail cars or the container trains that you see in the background, this is really the key attraction when it comes to cargo movement from the Port of Vancouver into Ashcroft, and then for onwards distribution into the rest of Canada, and even all the way into the US, Minneapolis, Chicago, of commodities and consumer goods that arrive in the Port of Vancouver. And we'll speak to this in a minute. Volume-wise, our site handled about 5,000 rail cars, so this is a quite impressive number. There are a number of yards, dedicated yards to CP and to CN that actually handle fewer rail cars. So we are, I think, have grown very, very steadily and nicely over the last years, and I think the future is bright for this number to increase, as you can see here. A few more pictures on what we do. So fuel is a big part, where fuel cars arrive from Alberta, for example, and then fuel by rail arrives. We transload into trucks, into fuel trucks that then make their way to the local gas stations or to the mines in the interior of BC. So that's a big part of our activity today. But then, as I explained, our future really has started as we opened the warehouse and we were able to attract importers to the likes of retail, household brands that bring product into Canada from Asia primarily, and that look for a place to unload the containers that are the shipping containers, and then the shipping containers are sent back to the port, and the cargo is distributed throughout the country by domestic types of containers. And so more pictures here. It's exciting. Every cargo is different. We unload barbecues, we unload the garden chairs, we unload the heaters. It's all kinds of things. And that diversity, both in terms of commodities and transport modes, rail and truck, is, I think, what makes the site attractive and creates what we call the freight village. so that we generate cargo connection opportunities, we generate jobs for the people in the area, and we generate traffic for the rail, which otherwise would have gone by truck. So it's converting rubber tires to steel wheels. And so that's where the location is very unique and makes sense when you actually show the advantages to a lot of people, both inside Canada, inside BC, but also on an international basis with some of the shipping lines that look for points to arrive in Canada and then distribute into the country. On the export side, I think we have spent over the last years a lot of time meeting with the various producers of primarily forest products. So we have mapped and tracked every single mill, every single forestry working site, many of them located in the area of where we are, others located in northern BC. And so all of that cargo converted to the number of containers is about 600,000 standard containers of export products, pulp and lumber primarily, that is exported through the Port of Vancouver. A lot of that makes its way down to the port by truck. So these are the trucks that go down the Coquihalla Highway, that go down the interior, and that make their way into already congested Vancouver to unload and then stuff into shipping and ocean containers. The value that I think Ashcroft brings is that we can transport ocean containers up to where we are, unload the import cargo, and then have a better, faster, smoother, more efficient, and more sustainable, eco-friendly way to serve the export markets, to load pulp and lumber directly into the containers that then go by rail car back to the port and then are exported to overseas markets. Before I get there, our funding, we're currently in the middle of a $28 million expansion project, which we put together as a private enterprise, and we're ready to put and start and execute on it until Transport Canada said this is a strategic opportunity, and we put in a funding application, and we were awarded a matching grant 3 years ago to have support from Transport Canada in our build-out plans. The number of obligations on what to build and how to build it, and what speed and what to invest. And this is where in the middle of next year we will be completed with our so-called phase 1 development, and the warehouse that you saw, the rail tracks, the development of the site, earth movement, all of that is done partly with funding of the government, for which we're of course very thankful, but it's also done hand in hand. And the support I think that we have had from Transport Canada to invest into critical infrastructure to serve the BC market, the gateway, to be the gateway for BC exports, and to be that fluidity out of the Vancouver supply chain, where today a lot of cargo moves by trucks and we try to convert it to rail. I think having Transport Canada as a solid partner in this journey is very helpful, and has proven to be very helpful and continues to be so. So the build-out plan is our phase 1 is well underway. We are looking at what's after that. Once we're done with this part, there's a lot of exciting projects in terms of different types of cargo. We're looking at facilities, a larger warehouse facility. We're looking at facilities for grain, so that grain would come, instead of going to the congested Vancouver area, would come and we would load into containers for specialty crops, for example, that are exported to overseas markets. Different commodities, anchoring large cargo owners, so to the likes of fuel companies, to the likes of the grain associations, to the likes of retailers that bring goods in. What we try to do is work hand in hand with the cargo owners and craft dedicated solutions with them, develop it with them, where we invest, where also the cargo owners co-invest, and where we create that freight village and that supply chain solution which combines rail, combines our workforce, flexibility, and offers, I think, opportunities for local businesses to thrive both on the import and export side. This is a bit the build-out vision that we put forward, developed a few years ago, and it's not quite there yet, but we're certainly well underway, and we're excited by the opportunities. And it's, as always, the most difficult part is to get the first customer and get the ball rolling. Once there's a need and there's cargo, then there are competitors of your first 1 or 2 customers that say, wow, if it makes sense for co-op, to do business here, then we as Shell, maybe we should also look at this terminal. And so this is where in each type of activity that we've done so far, we have seen that one leads to the other, and we are quite thrilled by the developments that are ahead. It's in logistics and infrastructure, nothing moves at lightning speed. It's not week by week, but it's certainly month by month and half year by half year that we make our way. I will spend, if we are okay, I will spend 2 more minutes on the ownership. So the site was developed by an entrepreneur from BC who 15 years ago saw the opportunity in an area with not too many people, but saw an opportunity to be that gateway for the Port of Vancouver, and acquired the plot of land, developed it in a number of rounds on development of rail tracks and first infrastructure and cargo facilities. And in 2018, we as a company, we went out and looked for a larger strategic partner. Then in 2018, 60% of the capital and of the project and of the terminal was sold to PSA. I myself represent PSA, so I moved to Vancouver a year and a half ago. PSA, not a household name around the world, but in the logistics space, very well known. We are previously PSA stood for the Port of Singapore Authority. We're not a government institution anymore, but we do operate the largest container terminal and the largest container port in the world for transshipment based in Singapore. So this is our home base, but with 40 container terminal locations around the world. Singapore being our home port, but around the world, in China, obviously, in Asia, in Europe, and in the Americas, with 40 different terminals, mostly located in port areas on the waterfront. So most comparable to those of you who've seen the container terminals in Vancouver. That's our core business of PSA. But we are developing interesting gateways and interesting logistics facilities like Ashcroft. So it was, for us, the first investment into Canada, into the middle of BC, with our international reach into the shipping markets and into the shipping lines and into logistics flows. We saw this opportunity in Ashcroft, and we decided to partner and acquire 60% stake, and now develop the business the way it was intended to. And so when you then have that network to reach out to business partners, shipping lines, cargo owners around the world, combined with the possibility to serve local exports from BC or from the prairies, I think it's a very powerful combination. And I will end the presentation here with a bit of our view as PSA. Our first investment in Canada was actually in Ashcroft, right here in BC, but we didn't stop there. Last year, in 2019, we acquired a container terminal in the port of Halifax, the Halterm terminal, quite well known on the eastern side of Canada, where basically Montreal is the main gateway, but also there with ships getting bigger and Montreal having restrictions for ships to come in. Halifax is again, I think, a groundbreaking alternative to the traditional ways of bringing cargo in, because it's located at the coast and can take in big ships. And we saw that opportunity, and we were able to buy this terminal, which is more, if you like, part of our mainstream activity, what we do around the world, and likewise a terminal in Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania. So we do look at at Canada end to end. Obviously, Ashcroft as a location, as a team, as a development has its standalone dedication, and so does Halifax. But then when you take a step back and you see that actually many of the trains that leave Vancouver go by Ashcroft and end up in Montreal, the CN and the CP organization is the same. Also, when we look at the importers to the likes of Canadian Tire that imports cargo through Vancouver and Halifax, very quickly, despite the size of your country, we do realize that there's value in being present in many locations. So this is, I think, the additional angle that we bring to Ashcroft as a standalone terminal. I will stop here and try to do this. I overran a little bit, but I hope it gave you an impression of where we are today and what we have in mind and the vision and our values and why we go ahead and press on to develop Ashcroft and the business entity in this region.
Well, thank you for that. And we have no feedback, and thank you, great. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Cole? Questions, comments? A huge operation.
It's a big operation with 66. Yeah, and Patty, Shannon, please feel free to jump in. But what I will say is that I think it depends very much on the type of cargo. So if we look at fuel, for example, that comes down 1,500 kilometers from northern Alberta, and is then transloaded in our facility from rail cars into trucks that then feed the local gas stations, and thereby saving previously where distribution came from Calgary. Thereby saving truck miles and greenhouse gas emissions. So I think that's one that goes straight, if you like, from a rail car into a fuel truck and then to the local gas station. But I think there are other types of cargo, like retail cargo, that goods that go to the supermarkets or go to the retail stores, to the likes of Canadian Tire or Walmart or Best Buy, or those types of goods that traditionally always come from Vancouver or from Calgary, some from far away, and where we are working with some of those importers or retailers to make Ashcroft a sort of intermediate point of distribution for then the last mile, if you like, into Merritt, into Kelowna, into Kamloops, into other parts of BC. So for sure the opportunities are there. Of course, it's all a question of the size of the population and the demand and the purchasing that goes on. But I think the bigger opportunities on the export side, when we look at some of the forestry, some of the mining, resource industries, in terms of what they make and the employment that they create and the cargo and the goods that they move, having a consolidation point like Ashcroft is, I think, valuable to a region because ultimately it helps to bundle and then lower cost for businesses in our local area. And I would like to go back to the point that the councillor previously made about having a business like Ashcroft Terminal in our region. We have big plans and ambitious plans, and I think we're located in the right area. One of our concerns that potential customers have is if you scale up from 66 to 100 or to 150 employees or 200 employees, where are they going to come from? How big is the village of Ashcroft, or how big is the area where people are willing to travel? Are people driving down from Kamloops? That's an hour. And so that is actually one of our concerns. And I think what we do offer is jobs with a great amount of stability, with individual development opportunities. So we have equipment operators that operate highly specialized equipment. And then, of course, starting at the entry level in the warehouses, also, unskilled labor. The only thing we need is dedication and motivation and willing to work hard. But the rest, we have programs to develop and train people. But I think the ability to reach out into cities and villages around Ashcroft will be key as we grow. So any support that as we grow that we could get is very appreciated. Thank you very much. And I think it's a visit says more than 1,000 words. So you're more than welcome, time permitting, to visit our facility and see for yourself what we're doing, how we're doing it, and also what we call the smell of the place. It's the kind of people that we are and what we're trying to achieve. So by all means, do get in contact with us. We'll be pleased to host a visit. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Mayor and Council. We're going to get into today is some review of the 2021 to 2025 financial plan with an opportunity for some discussion. This is not the reading of the plan at this time. That'll come at the next council meeting, and the adoption of the plan will need to be done by May 11th. So that's we'll touch base on that at the end. So it's a follow-up to January 29th when we went through and looked at the 2021 financial plan. We went into some detail on capital at that time and provided you some information there. We're going to go through, look at some revenue, expenditure, capital, reserve information. We'll talk in some detail about proposed tax rate increase for 2021. We'll look at the 2021 staffing levels that we discussed, a little bit of a change there on that. Relative to January 29th, we'll talk about expenses and the impact of inflation and some other cost increases that we factored in. We'll touch on some significant variances from the previously presented one. There hasn't not too many significant variances, but where there are variances, we'll get into those. The Appendix A is the 2021-2025 financial plan. It's the summary that will be included in the bylaw. And then Appendix B is the capital plan that will be included in the bylaw as well. And we've got bylaw numbers in place for that, and we'll be working on that this week and get that to you by the end of the week, so you'll have it for next week. So if we move on to the second page here, we'll just get through some revenue information. So first off, we're just comparing the 2021 draft plan that you see today with the 2020 plan. Now, remembering that 2020, we did the plan in May, and at that time, we did adjust the plan for COVID-19 as well. So it is very similar to what the plan is this year, given the fact that we are adjusting this one somewhat for COVID-19. You will see, looking at the revenues right off the top, there is an increase in tax revenue by $351,000. or roughly 4.5%. Some of that relates to non-market changes, so new construction and tax revitalization. I'll talk to more detail on the taxes in a few minutes, but that is one of the largest increases on the revenue side. A big increase for 2021, and thanks in no part to our grant writing ability as well too, is that we've got $10.8 million in grants, government grants, which is about an $8 million increase. A big chunk of that is $6.75 million related to Vote Street Phase 2. And that is a project that is contingent on grant funding. We've got some increases on sales of services and what those increases relate to. We did revert back to the 10% discount on utilities for 2021, and that adds $180,000 in revenue for 2021. The increase in 2021 on clay banks, that was something that we didn't factor in last year, was the fact that clay banks was going to have such a good year, and we're factoring in that they'll probably have another good year, and that's $130,000 in additional revenue. We've got in our 2021 plan some sewer disposal fees and water dispensing fees for Trans Mountain. So with the new facilities that we're building up by the airport, we've added in $300,000 for sewer disposal and $30,000 for water dispensing.
And can I ask a question, seeing as how
Yeah.
you're on Trans Mountain? Have we added the $370,000 amount that is set aside for trails? It isn't coming to us until they start the project, but they're going to be starting it this year from what I understand, so.
That has not been added in. That's something we can take a look at and see if we can add that in as a grant funding type opportunity for 2021, or if that is a 2022 item.
Okay, and I'm not sure when they plan on doing that, or I can't remember what's in the agreement. But I also know there's $50,000 worth of scholarships or bursaries, I'm hoping, that we can look at the potential for an endowment, which I'm asking finance to look into that potential for the endowment for that,
Okay.
along with the agreement. And obviously that's not in here either.
And that would just be a flow through then, that $50,000? Would it just go out to
I'm not sure if they
recipients?
expect us to flow it through or if we can use it as an endowment.
Okay,
I can't remember what was in the agreement. I'm
All right.
hoping.
we'll get some information on that after the meeting then.
Thank you.
The increases are offset by some reduced facility booking and programming fees as well. So even though we've got some user fee increases or service increases, we are going to see lower facility booking and programming fees again in 2021. And the return on investments, you may notice that number being down as well. There are lower interest rates compared to when we had put the plan together in 2020. And we are also allocating interest to the newly created reserve accounts as well, so that reduces the revenue there. Just a comparison between 2021 draft plan and that we did on January 29th and the meeting today. Some of the variances on the revenue side there. $350,000 reduction in grant revenue. That's due to the application we had for the downtown washrooms that was not approved, unfortunately.
But I understand we're trying a different source of grant funding for that project, or am I thinking of a different project? Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship. At this time, I think what we're going to do is bring the project back to the Economic Development Committee to kind of review what the best course of options are for downtown bathrooms generally.
Okay.
But there is no kind of immediate grant funding that looks like it could be applicable for that at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
We, of course, have a $90,000 increase there for airport grant funding that we did receive for the operation, so that's been added in. There is a $236,000 increase, as I mentioned earlier, in the sales of services. We did not have the discount reduced down to 10% on the previous version that we presented, so by reducing that down to 10% from the 17%. And also the garbage and collection fees and recycling fees have been increased based on actual results for 2020, so a couple of increases there. And again, the $100,000 decrease in the return on investments due to interest rate changes. The 5-year revenue plan, bullet number 3 here, so that assumptions that are made on this plan, the taxation net increase, and I'll talk in some more detail on tax in a few minutes here, but the net increase there is excluding transit taxes. Hopefully the assessment growth that we do see over the coming years with new developments will help us be able to keep the increases in line with inflation. I've included 2% increases for 2022 through 2025. That's being optimistic at this point, but based on some assessment growth, hopefully we can get the revenue up to a reasonable level.
Mr. Anderson, can we go back to taxation? Did you say excludes transit taxes? Did you mean to say include?
Oh, did I mean, yeah, the 8.2 million includes the transit taxes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that. The incremental increase that you see in the parcel tax line is due to potential new subdivisions. So the Exit 286 project for water and sewer extensions adds $410,000. And then also, if there are additional lots created through subdivisions, those will also attract a parcel tax. So there's a bit of an increase for that, but then the large increase is the Exit 286.
And I have one other question. Does that mean Exit 286 and Palomino Estates? You've taken the two of them as that?
Correct,
one
yes.
piece?
I refer to Exit 286 as the combined project, not just the information center.
Thank you.
The capital budgets that we are setting for 2022 to 2025 are not where we want to see them. They're not built out to the extent that we really should have them. When we go through the exercise in the fall here for 2022 to 2026, we will need to have detailed capital budgeting for a 5-year period, especially when we go forward with a development cost charge bylaw. Because the bylaw needs to refer to projects in the financial plan or in the long-term asset management plan. So we need to make sure that we have those in place as we go through that, because the charge has to relate to something, and that something needs to be in a plan. So that being said, when you see the grant revenue number drop off, it's not that all of a sudden we're not applying for grants, it's just that we don't have a lot of capital projects in here that we would fund through grant funding. So this will get built out in the following budget. So bullet point 4 there is incremental revenue. So what this is showing is the increase in revenue excluding any grant funding. So not including, the discrepancies that happen year over year due to grant funding. Of 2022 to 2025 based on 2021 as sort of the base budget year. So you can see in 2022, revenues go up by $2 million, and there's some miscellaneous revenues of about 38, so it's 2073169 is the total increase in the revenue line 2022 compared to 2021. And a big chunk of that, the $900,000, is an increased revenue through Trans Mountain. So increased water and sewer fees that we would be able to receive in 2022 are quite substantial. Those drop off in 2023 to the same level as 2021. And then in 2024 and 2025, we assume that they drop right off and we're just getting revenue from the general public that might be using those services.
So why a reduction?
It's a reduction based on 2021 year. In 2021, we know we've got over $330,000 in revenue for Trans Mountain. So in 2024, we say that there is no revenue for Trans Mountain. So we're back down to about $150,000 just from local consumers of those services.
Okay, thank you.
So that's the increase there, and the majority of the revenue growth by 2025 is from the property tax base. So you can see that it goes up $1.5 million relative to 2021 by the time we hit 2025.
And a lot of that is the non-market
It would be, hopefully it's non-market, and hopefully it's based on an expectation of some light industrial growth, not just all on the backs of residents. So that's what we built in, and we'll talk about taxes a bit on that.
Thank you.
So property tax, summary for 2021. The assessed home values in Merritt increased by an average of 9%. The proposal we have in our plan is to decrease the mill rate by 5.3%. So the 2020 mill rate was 4.8815. 2021, it would go down to 4.6215. What that means is that the net average increase for a resident would be 3.4%. Those that had existing properties in 2020 would be paying 3.4% more, assuming they had a 9% increase in their valuation. We're going to be loading up the tax rates for the other taxing authorities this week. I think we've got them all in now. So when we put forward the tax rate bylaw next week, it'll have all of the rates in it. And in the past, we have put a calculator on the website so that people can go in and put their assessed value in and figure out what their tax bill will be, close to what it will be, because we won't be getting the notices out till the middle of May. So that's something that we'll work on. You can see, you can't see on this here, but when we get into some detail on taxes, the 29% decrease in the light industrial rate. So in 2020, that rate was 28.79. We're proposing it to be 20.42. Now, we call based on competitive analysis. It brings us in line with comparable communities in the region, and that's one of the things that you need to do when you look at your tax rates, is to make sure that they are fair and representative of other communities when it comes to certain industries. And that's one that's really been a lot higher than other surrounding municipalities in the past. And we are at the same time going to be proposing removing the tax revitalization exemption from the light industrial class, and possibly some other classes as well, but for sure the light industrial class. So that's going to provide us with a more stable revenue stream. So when these new businesses come on board, we're not, 1 year giving them 100% and then 75 and 50%. The rate is very attractive for them because it is competitive. And from feedback that we have is, I think businesses would prefer a rate that is, in line with other communities versus having to apply for a revitalization tax exemption. So.
And just as a reminder that when we give a tax exemption to a light industrial partner or business or whatever we want to call them, that it's the residents that picks up the slack. So this is good for the residents as well.
Yes, exactly, yeah. And in 2021, we're adding on $193,000 by the recovery of the revitalization tax exemption, or 25% of that revitalization tax exemption for Merritt Green Energy. So that comes back on board in 2021 as well. So overall, the municipal taxes are expected to increase by 4.5%, excluding, again, the other taxing bodies, which we will add into our tax rate bylaw. The residential funding of the property tax, so a bit of a breakdown here, which gives you the non-market changes and the proposed tax increase of 3.4%. So we can see that there is an increase of $215,000 that will come out of the residential tax base this year. 76 of it relates to new construction. So those non-market changes, a new house has been built, or valuations have gone up through improvements on land. The $76,000, 65% of it, or $139,000, comes from the existing tax base, 2020 over 2021. So that's where we come up with the 3.4% increase. The $139,000 equates to a 3.4% increase on existing residents. That 3.4% translates to approximately $47 worth of municipal tax from the average property, 2021 to 2020. These numbers are only, again, for the average increase. We have included a municipal tax increase matrix in Appendix C there, a little bit of a roadmap. If your house was 320 and now it's 360, what do you expect the average increase to be? In this example here that I've put down, 320 to 340 would be a homeowner gain of $20,000 and would see an increased tax of 0.6%. Or $9.37 municipal tax. So you can go through, you look at the matrix, and I think we've ramped it up to about 15% plus or minus on the increases. The business industrial properties, that includes the heavy industry, light industry business, is up 3.7% or $130,000. A few things that we've done here, utility mill rate was adjusted upward to our statutory minimum. So our maximum is $40, and we weren't quite at $40 last year, so we bumped it up to 40. So that adds a little bit of revenue on the utility side. We're adding back in the tax revitalization for Merit Green Energy again, as I mentioned, and then changing that rate to 40. That's a total increase of $204,000. There's additional $48,000 of revenue due to new businesses or expanding businesses, so the non-market changes on the business side. It's offset by a loss of $60,000 due to some existing businesses being assessed at a lower value. And we say declining industry, and the reason we say that is the heavy industry actually did decline. The assessment values on heavy industry did decline, as well as the assessed values on hotels and restaurants in general did decline as well. They based that on business income, and of course COVID kind of gave a hit to a lot of those tourism industries, so their values went down as well. And we're expecting the change due to the change in tax rate for light industry to be about $50,000 in 2021. So that's the revenue side of the equation. The expenditures going through 2021 draft versus the 2020 plan. Again, 2020 plan was set with COVID-19 in mind. Yeah.
Can I also ask about the industrial mill rate? We were also looking, it's close, but it's still not completely competitive with other communities. Were we going to do the reduction over a couple of years? Is that still the case?
Yeah, through to the mayor. I'm not sure we were looking at the heavy industrial side as much as the light industrial side
Just the light,
for this
yeah.
year. Definitely something we should look at every year as well, but the biggest variance was on the light industrial side.
Okay, thank you.
So just, looking plan over plan, some of the differences there. In general government, there is a communications role, and we've got an addition there, which is a 0.5 FTE for 2021. I'll go through some payroll in more detail a little further on here. The protective services side, moving a part-time position to a full-time position is one of the larger increases on protective services. And we've added in some additional costs for COVID supplies and so forth that wasn't budgeted last year. Transportation increase there is $400,000 when we take the staffing that gets split between transportation, water, sewer, and actually allocated into recreation as well, because they have staff that do work in the parks, and some of their wages go into that area as well. So in 2020, we did have a bit of a COVID-19 impact reduction in the plan due to the fact that people were laid off at the time and we weren't sure how long that was going to last. So we did factor in a bit of a reduction in 2021 on the public works side. There is no reduction factored into 2020 into 2021. And we've got a cost for 2021 of a source water analysis and assessment and operating cost of $50,000 added into contracted services. Development services, and this has been approved in the past, is this new planner position. I think Mr. MacArthur's pretty happy about that. So we've got that in there at 0.83, I think it might be in at 0.5, but still, June, you're okay for June or July? Somebody to start, okay. Is offset by lower consulting fees. So there's going to be more work done in-house on this year versus prior years, based on the fact that we'll have a planner in place. Water.
And we actually have been interviewing planners, correct? And some good news, I think, at some point. Mr. MacArthur?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, we've been interviewing planners over the last couple months, and we're hoping to be closer to a hire, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay, thank you.
So recreation, we did factor in some reduced program delivery costs for staff in the plan. It's still going up slightly, but that's mostly related to, chargeback of public works staffing. So recreation is very similar year over year. Increase the budget for water treatment of 60,000. We didn't have that in the budget last year. That's a bit of the reason why water is going up. So comparing the plan as it is today versus the January 29th plan, a few changes that have been made since you would have seen that plan. In general government, we've added in some increased use of casual employees for finance. So a casual accounting clerk has been added in, and the budget for that is $20,000. Increase in computer software maintenance, going through a deep review of that, we realized that our costs were under plan on that area, so we've increased that budget as well. And we've had a decrease in contracted services. A service that HR was using was dropped, so we've saved some money on the HR side. Revising the RCMP charges with new information from them on the first quarter billing, and their cost per employee has gone up, so we've increased that amount. Normally, we're pretty safe on the RCMP. We normally budget to a fairly full complement. We're not budgeting to the full complement because it does take time to hire, but even so, we've increased the cost there by $150. We've allocated some of the CPO office expenses to the recreation and facility area, stuff that the Director of Recreation manages is now in his area. Transportation, we've removed bridge insurance, and that might sound fairly daunting that we don't have bridge insurance anymore, but the plan was $34,000 in 2020. The estimate for 2021 is $200,000. Out of the 40 municipalities that the insurer that we use works with in BC, only Merritt and Grand Forks had bridge insurance. So a lot of municipalities opt to self-insure on bridges, and that is something that we are proposing we do for 2021. Additional services at the airport for ongoing maintenance. So we've added in another $45,000 in services at the airport, and we know that we've got funding that will cover those maintenance projects that we've got planned. Recreation and water utility, you'll notice a couple of accounting things there, some increases in amortization expense compared to what we had in the plan for prior years. So that's the majority of the increase in those two areas.
Is that just reallocating from some other area, or is that an actual increase in assets?
There would have been increases in assets in those areas, some acquisitions over the last few years, but
Okay.
I'm not sure why the discrepancy is so high compared to year over year. I think it's a plan-to-plan variance versus a actual-to-plan variance. So over the 5-year period here, on the expenditure side, 2021 through 2025, you'll see a few changes here. There is a lower reliance in 2022 and 2023 in development services. You'll see a drop in there numbers for those years, and that's due to you know, less of a reliance on consultants. We've been using consultants fairly extensively with the OCP and other plans that we've been working on, but we're hopeful in 2022, 2023, we'll be able to bring that back down and do that in-house. And debt servicing, you will notice a substantial increase in debt servicing starting in 2022 if we go ahead with the Exit 286 water and sewer borrowing for that sewer extension.
And just as an aside, that even with an increase in our debt servicing, we are still far below what our maximum level.
Yes, Mayor, that's
Yes.
correct. We will be under 50% on our limit, and speaking with the ministry and MFA, that is not unheard of in municipalities in BC to be at those levels, and some are even pushing up to their maximum levels. So we're definitely still well within our servicing limits.
Thank you.
So some of the estimated annual adjustments.
Sorry, we have one other question.
Oh, was there a question?
Councillor
Sure.
Luck?
Sorry, Mr. Anderson, those increases would be offset by payments by 286 and Palomino anyway, is that correct? Even though they go in there, those debt servicings are gonna be paid by the agreement that they would pay those back
Yes,
anyway?
yes.
So it's kind of an in and out or flow through kind of thing, is that right?
Yeah, through the
Give me a
mayor to Councillor Luck. Yeah, the servicing costs that we incur will be recovered through a parcel tax. So we're not, we're fully recovering the cost of the development through property parcel taxes.
Just so the public knows that we're not paying for that,
Yeah.
we're not paying the service, they will be doing that, we're just facilitating the ease of getting all that done
Yes,
yeah.
that is
Okay.
correct, yeah.
Perfect, thank you for that, yep.
So outside of the normal sort of 2% increases on expenditures, there are some rates that have sort of been adjusted up a little bit here. Things like software, insurance, and audit seem to be a little higher than 2% recently. You'll see a big increase in the conferences, training, up 5% in 2022. The amounts that we had into those budgets in 2020 were really reduced, and we're just sort of starting to bring those back up again. We're hopeful that by 2022, post-COVID, that we have some opportunity to get people out there and get their professional development and get the training that they need as well. So that's the one big increase we got in 2022. But the big what if, of course, is the current inflation and costs. We all hear about it with building costs and materials and supplies and those sort of things. So even though we've got 2% increases in here for materials across the board, it's hard to say if those are going to be 2% or 5% or what they may be. But we're keeping the increases in line with the revenue increases on the property tax. So.
And is there, I mean, Public Works is going to be, or even facilities, is going to be the ones that are hardest hit by the increase in some of these materials. Have we
Right.
kind of reviewed some of our capital projects for that potential?
That's a good point. We have not gone back and looked at the capital projects at this time. We're hopeful that it's still a competitive environment like we had for Vote Street Phase 1, and that our quotes or our estimates are based on enough contingency in the plan. But we haven't gone back and done a deep dive into any capital at this time. But there is some concern, yes, that there might be.
I was going to say, it's wood that has really taken a huge increase, doubled and even more than doubled in some cases, so it needs, we were hit hard with building our shop on a home level, so there are some big changes there. It would be worthwhile looking at if you've got time to change it before.
Yeah, we'll take a couple of the bigger projects and take a look at those.
It may need to be done on an adjusted basis down the road.
Yeah, amended, we may need to amend the budget when we get to the quoting stage. The payroll information, so 3.7 position increase relative to 2020 plan, and the breakdown is there with the FTE count of, the FTEs being about 2.5, and as I mentioned, you know, positions that are coming on midstream here are 0.5 for 2021. but a full-time position, 2022. So the increase is 3.7 in full-time equivalents, and for 2020, it's roughly about 2.5 in cost. The difference between the January 29th plan that was put forward is a 0.2 increase in FTEs for finance.
Mr. Smith? Oh,
One point that I wanted to clarify as well, it was mentioned earlier, but the potential addition to the fire roll, just looking at the FTE table here, you'll note that it's not in this particular FTE table, but it was mentioned earlier and is put into the numbers for protective services, so you will see that in there. We just omitted it in this particular table, is my understanding. Is that correct?
Yeah, that
Right.
looks like the case, yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Councillor Richard?
Well, my comment was from earlier, when we were talking about building and average increases, because not only is wood increased, but there's also a lot of supply issues with insulation and roofing materials, and that can delay costs and of course have project delays and increases as well, and probably more than the 2 or 5% is what I've seen in other evaluations for buildings and whatnot in the last year. So the 5 seemed a bit low. So I was concerned with that, that's all. Just adding to your comment about wood.
Sorry, I missed you. I didn't see your request. I had another comment. I can't remember what it was, so don't worry about it. It's gone.
So moving on to the capital plan. So the first 2 years of the 2021 to 2025 financial plan include nearly 26 million in capital spending. The 2 largest projects are the 7.5 million for Boat Street Phase 2. That is grant funding dependent. If there isn't a Boat Street Phase 2 in 2021, then we will divert $250,000 to road resurfacing efforts in 2021. So there is a fallback if we don't get the grant funding for that project. And then we've got the 7.5 million service extension project. It's in the 2022 plan, borrowing dependent on that. We've got some process to go through to get that through to the ministry to go to the next stage on that project. That could be late 2021 that we start to lend out that capital, or 2022. So you'll see that there is a fairly substantial drop-off when you get into 2023, 2024. Those budgets we will provide in more detail in the 2022 budget cycle this fall. So we will get some more detailed long-term capital plans, and as mentioned, that needs to be there in order to support the development cost charge bylaw and rate setting.
Councillor White?
I thought you referred to grant funding that was already received or in place for Phase 2 of Boat Street earlier.
Through the mayor to Councillor White, the grant funding for Phase 2, I did refer to the airport funding that we did receive. We have the funding request out there. I'm not, was there something else I'd referred to?
I think that it may have been a miscommunication, because I think you're probably referring to this 10,776,000 number that is in the 2021 plan. That's what we're budgeting for, but that funding hasn't yet been received. Or not, at least not all of it, and the biggest chunk is that 7.5 million.
But he did say Phase 2, right?
So that was the explanation for why that number is so high, and again, our plan is not going to look very accurate if we don't get that particular grant, but we have to account for it in order to make the application, so.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, sorry if that confusing there, but yeah, we do include these things that we do apply for into the revenue side of the equation, and we may or may not receive them, and the plan will get adjusted accordingly. So in Appendix D, there is a breakdown of the 2021 projects by funding source. And that includes the 7.5 million in borrowing for 2022 in Appendix B that you'll see there as well. total of 9.7, I believe, or 9.5 million in grant funding. Yeah, 9.46 million in grant funding, 3.7 million is going to come out of reserves, and 1.4 million in debt, for a total of 14.6 million in 2021. What's been removed since the 2021 capital plan that was presented on January 29th is the downtown washroom project. As mentioned, we did not get the grant funding, and we've removed that as a capital project here. The reserve and surplus continuity. So coming into the presentation tonight, the hope was to be able to provide you with a 5-year picture of the reserves, surpluses, how those balances change year over year with the capital that's in the plan. Unfortunately, working with the auditors over the last weeks, we weren't at that point yet to be able to provide that to you. We do have the sort of draft numbers for 2020 that are built into this opening, this ending balance for 2020, includes draft financial results at this point. And we are hopeful to be able to provide you in the near future with a full continuity of what happens with the reserves and surpluses as we add capital on. So it's been a year of, an interesting year adding these reserves into the system. It's going to be great as they are moved forward and we have those balances, and the policy says that every year we're going to fund those reserves to cover the following year at minimum, and then potentially even build them higher than that. So it'll be great once it is set up, but it has been a lot of work to get that in place. So looking at the summary here on 2020 opening through to the ending, and it's broken down by general. So the capital reserves, those are all of the reserve accounts that we've created. We've got some operating reserves for general. The primary one there would be the Financial Stabilization Reserve account with that COVID-19 funding, or the balance of it. And then surplus, that's the unappropriated surplus, so the surplus available just to be used to replenish reserve accounts and so forth. You can see that we still have a bit of an issue here with the surpluses in sewer being, 4.8 million out of that $12.5 million at the end of the year. So we've got substantial sewer reserve accounts. Even with the $2 million in COVID funding for 2020, our reserve balances will be down $1.5 million. When we did our initial sort of pre-COVID funding plan on reserves, when we put the policy forward, we were forecasting an $11 million surplus and reserve balance at the end of 2020. So we're about $1.5 million ahead of that thanks to COVID funding. So that's on a positive note there. The following chart there just gives a breakdown, general water, sewer, transit, showing you the capital reserve balances, the operating reserves, the surplus balances, and so forth. The table below is a summary of the reserve accounts, excluding, these are just the capital reserve accounts. So there's 3.3 million in capital reserve for general, there's 544,000, and at this point there is nothing in the reserve for water. Now, since our 2020 budget did not include an allocation to reserves, the auditor suggested that we don't do it in the 2020 financial statements, but January 1st we will do a transfer to those reserve accounts to be able to cover the 2021 capital expenditures. So that will happen in January. When they present their financials, they will talk about those entries that will be done at that time. And then on a go-forward basis, for the end of the year, we will make sure that we have done that transfer and set those reserves for the following year. As mentioned in the past, consistent annual operating surpluses are really the primary source of the reserve funding. So as long as we've got surplus revenue on an annual basis, we can fund those reserve accounts. The grant funding that we do get does cover capital projects, but doesn't always cover 100% of the projects, as we know. So the more grants and operating grants that we can receive, the better as well. Helps us increase our surpluses at the end of the year. The policy, as mentioned, we want to maintain minimum reserve balances at the end of the fiscal year to cover the following year. As mentioned, I have been working with the auditors here with getting this information together, and additional details on the long-term reserves will be provided during the 2022 planning cycle. So as we get into the 2022 to 2026 budgeting, a continuity schedule will be magically flowing from the system at that point. So that is our goal.
And just as per the city auditor, it will also be as per council in our strategic plan, right? Just not the auditor. Just thought I'd
That is correct,
mention
Mayor.
that.
The disclaimer, the financial risks and implications, that there's a lot of information here for this plan, and we provided as much as we can in schedules and tables and backup, showing you the impact, in this case on surpluses and so forth. The options that we have at this time, obviously it's going to be lots of great discussion, I hope, on the plan here as we put forward our 2021 financial plan for you next week, and the tax rate bylaw, if there's any input that we can get out of the meeting tonight as we put those together. There was others consulted, as we mentioned in the prior meeting there. We did public consultation through a survey. That information was provided on the March 30th Committee of the Whole meeting. And the auditors, again, have been assisting us with the reserve and surplus calculations here. What the next steps are is to bring the two bylaws forward at the next council meeting for 3 readings. That's the financial plan and the tax rate. We are then looking for adoption of those on May 11th. And the weekend of May 17th is when we would produce the property tax notices, and they would be mailed the week of the 17th. We are not proposing...
Mr. Anderson, you noticed that you also mentioned earlier that you had, before the notices go out, that you're going to put the tax calculator on the website. Is that going up soon?
Yeah, our plan would be after the first 3 readings on the 20th of April
Okay.
here, that we would post it at that point. I don't want to be premature on that, but once it's come to you and you've got the first 3 readings, then we can post it for that period of the 20th through to the middle of May, probably about 4 weeks, that people will be able to go up and do a quick calculation.
Okay, thanks. Anybody have anything for Mr. Anderson or any other staff member? But it would be Mr. Anderson.
I do have Sean Strang, our Deputy Director here, that can answer any specific tax questions as well too, as we put that information together. So, or capital project stuff, we've got a spreadsheet handy to answer any questions there.
Well, I'd like to say that I like how you've presented your plan this year. And I know that you've put an awful lot of work into this, and I thank you for that. Your plan is clear, easy to read. There's no hidden assumptions. You've laid everything out for us, and I understand that you're still not finished. You've still got asset planning, reserves and surpluses, and a whole lot of other things that we haven't even talked about tonight. And there'll be a lot more work required. But you're on the right track. Can't do it all in 1 year. And it wasn't expected, and I think you've come a long, long way. And I thank you for that major overhaul. And I also want you to thank your staff for doing a lot of the behind-the-scenes work. We recognize it takes a whole team to put this together. But it also needs a good leader to set the pace, and I think you've done that. So thank you for that. So I look forward to more great things from your department. And once you've finished the audit, I hope that you can take some time to just take time off, because you deserve it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mayor. Thank you for your comments. And it is a great team in finance, and really hitting it out of the park when it comes to working with the auditors this year and getting everything ready for the plan at the same time. So it's been a good year.
And it shows, it's a nice, easy-to-read report. Mr. Smith? or, I'm sorry, Councillor Richard. He's been hiding there on me. I can't seem to see him tonight.
It's a bad position around the table. Too low to the ground. My only question with the reserves, where we had the split up, the general total, the sewer and the water coming at 6 million, the beginning and the end. I thought that we had more in reserves. Was that just taking the operating and then splitting them that way for the reserve funds? Like, just to recap that part? But I see how the three,
Yeah.
total the 6.6 at the open, and then at the ending, it's at the 3.88. But
That's just the, through the mayor to Councillor Etchart here. It's the capital reserve only. It's not the operating reserve, and it's not the unappropriated surplus. So it's really at $12 million when you total all of those together.
yeah, okay.
So
That's what I was thinking. I was
it's
like, wait
just
a minute.
the general capital one that was sort of highlighted there.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, wait a minute. This is, yeah.
Because what happens with the capital projects is that we fund the general capital reserves, and then the money comes out of the general capital reserves to fund those projects. So when you look at the 3.8 million there, and we've got 3.7 million in the 2021 plan
Yeah.
that we need to be able to use to cover the 2021 capital, we're just about where we need to be. We need to fund that more to be able to cover the,
Bigger projects in the future. So that, yeah, they're all even. But I was just thinking, they seemed a little low, and I was thinking, yeah, the general was something different than the reserves, so.
yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
And we finished votes, we've finished our phase 1 Boat Street. That's where a lot of our operating reserves went. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Your Worship. I also want to thank the finance team for all of their effort, Wayne and Sean in particular, but the whole finance team for putting this budget together. I do want to provide, I think, a little bit of an overview of how I view this budget. I very much see this as something of a transitory budget year. We've shifted to a new model with our reserve accounts, which we've never historically had. I think there's still quite a bit of work, and I know that that's something that we're going to prove out over the next year into getting a really strong understanding of how that is going to operate, how we're going to fund those moving forward. I do want to make sure that council is aware and understanding of the fact that as it stands, we are at kind of unique inflection point in Merit's history. We're seeing growth, we're seeing additional demands on just about every point, whether it's parks, infrastructure, across the board. There's increases in spending, increases of costs of, you talked about it, Adam, with even wood and things like that. But I want to make sure that council understands that as it stands, we're still operating too far out of surpluses right now. We've put forward, I think, a better step than what has historically been done. There's been, in my opinion, too much willingness to operate out of what is our reserves. They're our lifeline. We're going to continue to address the infrastructure deficits through, some of these things that you've seen in this round. There's much higher applications for grants than we've historically had. Hopefully those prove out into actual grants, but that still remains to be seen. We've got a few other irons in the fire for additional revenue streams to be able to make it so we can minimize the tax burden on residents as much as possible. But I do want to be very clear with council that 2022, we're going to have a lot more understanding on a lot of these different areas, and so I don't want this to feel like there's going to be a surprise when we understand more on both the revenue, on the expense sides in coming years. That I don't think we're entirely out of the woods, and we need to do an excellent job attracting more business and more industry over the coming years to really provide better support and balance to the overall municipal budget. So I wanted to add those words so that I'm thrilled and confident in the direction, but we've got the yellow flag out, if not the red one, that there's still room to go.
Yeah. And so, thank you for that. And Mr. Anderson, did you have anything else for us? that was it, I suppose.
Yeah, Mayor, not a lot. I mean, as Mr. Smith says there, I mean, it is a heavy reliance on surpluses and reserves. We need to get out of that pattern. But we have been pretty conservative on our property tax estimates. I mean, we haven't included in there some of these proposals that have come forward through development and planning. They are not at the permitting stage at this point, so we're not sure where those are going to fall out and if they will be part of our revenue in 2023 or 2024 or 2025. We've added in light industrial, revenue of, or assessed values of only about $7 million over the next 4 years. That could be very light relative to Barkman and other opportunities that might come forward. So I'm hopeful that, the numbers are fairly conservative on the revenue side and we'll see some bigger increases in those areas. But that's how we budget, is we budget from a conservative perspective, especially when it comes to the revenue side.
Thank you. Councillor Luck.
Thank you for that comment, Mr. Smith, because that's what I had written down here. How vulnerable are reserves and how vulnerable are we moving and looking forward here? Because we know we have a massive infrastructure deficit here in our community and everything and that. So that's been answered, I think, pretty well. But Mr. Anderson, how are we looking moving forward to strengthen our reserves and that? I think you hit on it a little bit there, but are we going to have a plan over the next number of months to be able to see ways of how we strengthen that? We talked about, of course, increasing businesses and bringing more business in there, but what are we, if we don't, there's always an option A and an option B, right? And we're going to be looking at some of those different options over the next couple of months as we move forward here, because it is a big concern of mine, and I'm sure everybody around the table here.
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Luck. One of the big areas I think that we can look at as we get into the later part of the year is the development cost charges. We have not tapped into those development cost charges in my time here, and who knows how long. So if we've got some development cost charges that are really applicable to some of the capital projects in that 5-year plan, then we can start to tap into that $5 to $6 million that we have in the development cost charges instead of the unappropriated surpluses that are there today. So that's one area I think that'll open up as we look through that in more detail.
Okay, good.
And the fact that we haven't tapped into DCCs, is it the auditor's position that we can move some of that funding to cover past projects into a reserve for future projects? Not that it's going to make much difference, I guess it's still DCCs.
Yeah, through the mayor, my understanding of the development cost charges, and maybe Mr. MacArthur has another opinion on this as well too, is that it's a bit of a clean slate when we start to review them, that we can revise, where we want those funds to go, because some of these projects that were created 16 years ago are not applicable anymore. We have the funds there, they are in water, they're in sewer, they're in general. Are there other projects that we can assign them to? So I think we've got a bit of a clean slate when we start to look at that through the whole process. And as we look at new developments and what the rates are going to be able to fund those projects as well too, we can definitely increase our rates in a number of different areas. So I think it's still an issue that as I understand, of transferring it from sewer to water to general, because those reserves were set up for a specific fund.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I think we're pretty wide open.
Good, okay. And I'm going to go to Councillor Christopherson first.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to comment that I'm really pleased with the grant applications that have been going in and bringing monies into merit to fund various projects. It's something that I think has been underutilized in previous years, and really appreciate the work that the admin team and our grant writer are doing, because it certainly helps us to move along further. So thanks to the team.
Mr. Smith.
Your Worship, I did just want to elaborate a little bit on DCCs. Wayne is exactly correct. Any DCC project that was eligible, where we could have allocated funds, we needed to have done it earlier. You can't do it retroactively. I'm going to acknowledge that historically the city has, quite frankly, erred in not doing that. It's an error that can't happen. And so that's something for a point forward basis, but Wayne is exactly correct that by redoing the DCC bylaw, often we focused on the fees and how making sure the fees are correctly aligned, that we're charging for the right things, that the right amounts are being charged. But equally important is redoing the projects that are behind the DCC bylaw. So we have new projects that are eligible to allocate DCC funding to, because as it stands right now, if you look at our existing projects list, some of them just flat out aren't relevant anymore. There has been a change in trajectory such that those projects aren't going to be aren't going to be completed. There are some that still are. You know, I can think of some of the ones that are relevant today, the Springbank connection, for example, to Grimmett, and there's some other ones in there where there is DCC funding set aside, but there's specific limits on the amount of funding that can come from that. So it's that's going to be a really important project in the coming years.
Good, thank you. Councillor Bengu.
Thank you, Mayor. From the sounds of it, there's projects that were on the books but were not complete, and that's why there's the
No.
development service charges
No.
still there? No?
So
Mr. Smith.
the easier way of it, there was projects that were on the books that were complete, but they were not funded from the DCC account. They were funded from other accounts, surpluses, reserves. And so we don't have the ability, for the way the DCC account is set up under legislation, to retroactively
Move things around?
move those funds now. It could have been done when the project was complete in, say, 2014, but it's not something that we have the ability to do now. So what we can do is allocate the funds that are existing when we redo that DCC bylaw to projects that are going to be coming up. We can probably front load it a little bit, so the ones that are going to be coming up in the most near-term years, to be able to access those funds in the DCC's DCC accounts.
Thanks.
So seeing no other comments or questions, I'm going to just say thank you, and we're terminating this